Live free or die. Perhaps the most epic state motto in the entire United States. That is the state motto of New Hampshire, and unlike the other states, they embody this mentality of freedom or death. This state has no income tax and no sales tax because they choose to live free. And this is not a recent trend either. 6 months before the Declaration of Independence was signed, New Hampshire declared its independence from the British Crown. Today, we're going to cross the state of New Hampshire from north to south, starting in Berlin in the mountains and ending at the sea in Portsmouth. Joining me today is Tolu.
Hi.
Berlin is a factory town located in the White Mountains. And why are we starting here? Well, it has a rich industrial history that during the 19th century became more and more important in New Hampshire. And as it was becoming more important, more and more people were needed to fill the jobs in the factories. Many of those people came from Europe, like in the rest of the US. However, Berlin is only about 60 kilometers from Quebec, so many French Canadians came down to New Hampshire. Even to this day, allegedly, over half of the town of Berlin speaks French. Here in New Hampshire, they speak a dialect of New England French. So our first mission is in this industrial town of Berlin to find some old factories, and most importantly, to find a French speaker. So come with us as we speak French, get some breakfast, and cross this beautiful state from north to south. Join us. We're going to a diner called Live Free Foods. They made their choice. They live free, they don't die. You might remember Tolu from my very first video ever, talking about the capitals of Austria and Slovakia.
Yep.
Look at this. New Hampshire is known for its mountains, and Berlin is in the heart of the White Mountains. The White Mountains tower over the state of New Hampshire, and they're the highest mountains in the northeastern US. Oh, there's Live Free Foods. So we popped into the Live Free Cafe, and we got these sandwiches, which we'll let you know how they are, but we're probably gonna be biased because the people were so nice. And the guy in there speaks French, it is his first language. He's gonna come out here and talk to us very soon. So we're gonna eat, and then you'll hear some French, some New Hampshire French. This sandwich has French toast for bread, pain perdu.
There's apple slices in this pork belly sandwich.
Got some ham, eggs, like amazing freaking
Wow,
thing.
this is really good.
He got a pork belly sandwich with apple slices. This place so far, 10 out of 10. Maple syrup. Alors, comment vous vous appelez?
Mon nom c'est Paul.
Enchanté, Paul.
Enchanté.
On voulait voir un peu comment c'est la dynamique du français en Berlin, en New Hampshire, etc. Et si vous voulez élaborer un peu.
Quand j'étais jeune, je parlais seulement français. On était obligé de parler français parce que mes grands-parents ne parlaient pas anglais. Quand j'étais à l'école, c'était à moitié la journée en français, à moitié en anglais, jusqu'à 8th grade.
Et c'était comme ça pour tous les élèves de Berlin ou
Non.
juste à votre école?
Moi, je demeurais sur la East Side. Là, c'était les Canadiens.
Ok.
On parlait français, il y avait les magasins, tout parlait français. Ici, c'était les Anglais.
Comment ça a changé la dynamique du français à Berlin? Aujourd'hui, il y a beaucoup de monde qui parle le français entre eux ou c'est juste, par exemple, vous, est-ce que vous utilisez toujours le français ou pas?
Ma génération, il y a beaucoup de monde qui parle français encore.
Oui.
Mon fils, il parle pas français.
Et aussi la population de Berlin, il a beaucoup diminué, oui?
Yes.
Oui.
C'est moins que 10 000.
Qu'est-ce que tu penses c'est le cause de ça?
Du travail. Le moulin s'est formé. Beaucoup de monde est parti.
C'est quoi votre identité alors? Évidemment, vous êtes américain.
Oui, je pense que c'est américain.
Oui.
Mais quand je vais à Québec, je pense que Québec, c'est moi.
On voulait savoir si vous avez des mots qui sont du français de Berlin.
E-colin
E-colin.
means, oh my gosh.
E-colin. Alors, dernière question que j'ai. Le restaurant là, ça s'appelle Live Free. Ça veut dire quoi pour vous, Live Free or Die?
Pour moi, c'est bien fort.
Oui.
Hein?
Bah, merci Paul,
Oh,
c'était
bienvenue.
un plaisir.
Merci beaucoup.
Aussi, nous deux, on voulait dire que les sandwichs étaient incroyables.
Oh, good.
Oui,
C'est bon.
the first person we talked to in Berlin, New Hampshire, spoke French. Great guy, Paul. I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation. I think I'll post the entire French part of it on my French channel, so if you want to check that out, you can go over there. Highly recommend Live Free Food Store.
Excellent.
Now we have two more things to check out in Berlin that Paul told us about. The first one is we're gonna go find the Berlin dictionary so that we can learn some Berlin French slang. And then after that, we're gonna go check out the Russian church that was built by the Russian community here. And I hope you enjoy both of those things. So we're walking through beautiful downtown Berlin. There's so many churches in this town, it's really wild.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh yeah, there's First Baptist Church. There's the Russian church, there's the several French churches. I feel like another reason why the French language has probably died here is just because it's not like the US government was trying to like keep around other cultures and languages back in the day.
Person would do something like that?
The Berlin Historical Society. Oh no. So it looks like the Historical Society's closed. So we're gonna leave Berlin with the only word that we know being Ikola. Oh my god, Ikola. The next stop is the Russian church. Our trusty steed, which we'll be using to cross this great state today, is this beautiful Toyota RAV4. Berlin Duncan. And with that, we have made it to the Russian Orthodox Church. This is not the most inconspicuous building in all of Berlin, I would say. You know, all of the other churches, they're pretty typical for the US and for New Hampshire, but this, I mean, of course, in bigger cities, you might see a Russian church like this, an Orthodox church, but wow, it's beautiful. Let's go check it out. The Holy Resurrection Orthodox Church. Beautiful. And quickly, just to show the street name, because this is amazing. So the street, when we turned to drive up towards the church, was Russia Street, or Russian Street. And the street that the church sits on is Petrograd Street. Petrograd Street, here in Berlin, New Hampshire. St. Petersburg Street. 100-year anniversary was in 2015. So this church is from 1915. And the reason why this church is here is because as all of these immigrants were coming into the city to work in the sawmills and the paper mills, well, one of those communities was Russian. And so this neighborhood was the Russian neighborhood of Berlin, New Hampshire. Let's go and check out the church. Look, it's written in Cyrillic. Oh, it's locked. Ruskia Pravoslavnaya Tserkovi. Yeah, this is church. Russian, I'm guessing this is, Pravo is Orthodox. Russian Orthodox Church. So this is the name of it. So I think this is Saint, well, whatever. So this is Russian Orthodox Church, 1915. And then Jesus with the Cyrillic writing. Because Jesus, he was Russian, I think. No Russians here. I would have loved to say the 10 words of Russian that I know to these people and ask how many speakers there are of Russian. We'll never know. If you are a Russian Berlin speaker,
Hit us up.
hit us up if you speak Berlin and you're from Russia. But for now, we have to head southward. Let's go. Fun fact about New Hampshire is that the population density of New Hampshire just about exactly matches the population density of the entire world. In both cases, it's about, I'm going to get the number wrong, but it's like 150 people per square kilometer. That might be not correct, the number itself, but the exact same population density, which means that the world is just a microcosm of New Hampshire. Franconia Notch.
It's kind of a Swiss vibe.
Yeah. We've now reached maybe the most scenic site in New Hampshire, formerly. The symbol of New Hampshire for years was the Old Man in the Mountain, a rock formation that looks like an old dude. Look at that old man. It's even on the license plates of the cars of New Hampshire. However, in 2003, tragedy struck, and the Old Man of the Mountain fell down. The rocks were no longer, and now it's just a cliff. Now we're gonna walk down this trail and see the spot where the Old Man in the Mountain once stood and pay our respects.
Opened in 2011 and created through the generosity of hundreds of friends of the Old Man in Franconia Notch.
We've now reached the sacred place, and you have these things which point up to where he once stood. You can see what the profile of the rock used to look like. And right there on the side of Mount Cannon, one of New Hampshire's big skiing mountains, stood the Old Man in the Mountain. The symbol of the great state of New Hampshire, tragically taken away too soon. And just right over here, to commemorate the passing of the great man, the McDonald's symbol. I want to ask a New Hampshire resident what they think about the collapse of the Old Man in the Mountain and how it affected their life.
It was a bit, it was a melancholy, having missed the ability to come and see it in person.
There's a bug in my shirt. So you got to get like a skinny one. This might be a bit small, but I think I should be able to do it. Nice, I got 3. And now we're going to drive south on Interstate 93 towards Manchester, the biggest city in New Hampshire, through Franconia Notch. One of the most beautiful stretches of interstate in the entire country, especially on the East Coast. So come along and enjoy the beautiful views as we utilize the great United States interstate system. We've now reached Franconia Notch. On the west side of it, which is to our right, has Mount Cannon, which is where the Old Man in the Mountain used to be. That's the face of Mount Cannon. And Connor, he climbed that. New Hampshire is one of the few states in the Northeast that has a speed limit of 70 miles per hour. If that's not living free or dying, I don't know what is. Concord, the capital of New Hampshire.
New Hampshire began the United States modern lottery with the New Hampshire sweepstakes.
All right, it's been a little while since I last talked to you. We just took a drive down to Concord. To be honest, I wasn't planning on stopping in Concord today, but Tolu had a little meeting he had to get to, so he's at the library behind me. And I'm gonna take you through the little city of Concord, New Hampshire. Concord just so happens to be the capital of this great state, so I guess it makes sense that we stopped here. And right now I'm walking through all of the different state government buildings. So behind me you can see here, don't know exactly what this building is, but look at it. They have some really cool architecture. This building almost feels influenced by French architecture, just the way that the roof is. They got the like triangular pointy roof. That's kind of cool. Oh, this is the Legislative Office Building of New Hampshire. It's the United States Post Office, the courthouse, and the Legislative Office. Over here you have the State Library of New Hampshire, and you have this plaque which talks about the fact that New Hampshire has the first presidential primary in all of the US. Tolu will tell you more about that later. And then over here behind me is the New Hampshire State House. You can see I'm walking away from it so you can see the gold dome on top. So that is where the New Hampshire government resides. And now we're gonna walk through Concord to the other side of the city. To be honest, I don't know much about this city, did not do much research because I did not plan on stopping here. But we're gonna see New Hampshire's capital a little bit, and then we're going to see something quite cool for people who are into science and space exploration. Comment below, do you prefer Hampshire or New Hampshire? I'm obviously not in the US too often, but I make occasional trips back here. You guys like American videos? Do you want to see more content from the US? Looks like we got something cool coming up on the right. Check this out. Look at this church. Looks like a castle. Look at that. The Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church. That's pretty tight. Greek Orthodox. Not to be confused with the Russian Orthodox Church we saw earlier. I bet there were some Greek immigrants to Concord back in the day. The towns of New Hampshire and Massachusetts and, you know, the rest of the Northeast as well, but especially the area of the Merrimack Valley were the birthplace of the American Industrial Revolution. Cities like Lowell in Massachusetts, Manchester, where we'll be going soon, and of course Berlin, where we were this morning, and even Concord. They had rivers, they had accessible rivers especially, which is important. And so that's where these mill towns sprung up, and well, the early Americans, they needed labor. And at the same time, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, there were huge waves of immigration, mostly from Europe, but also from other parts of the world. And so that's when you started to get groups like the Greeks and the Russians and the French, the Quebecois from Quebec, who came and they worked in the mills, and then they formed their own neighborhoods. And that's how you end up with some of these churches in pockets of the US like that, these Greek churches and these Russian churches, and there's another church up there. Maybe it has a cool story as well. Built in 1874, but an old brick church. And over there is the Islamic Center of Concord, New Hampshire. Obviously, I doubt that there were many Muslim people coming here in the 1800s when the other immigrant waves were coming, but more recently, of course, America's demographics have included more people from Latin America, the Middle East, and now there's an Islamic center. Here we are in America. Look at that. Europe could never have roads this wide. In a major turn of events, this guy came and picked me up, so no more walking in the heat. The first American who ever went to space was Alan Shepard. And Alan Shepard is from New Hampshire. One of the notable people from New Hampshire, if you will. And so now we're gonna go and see a monument that the state of New Hampshire dedicated to our man Alan Shepard, the counterpart of Yuri Gagarin. I'm sure those dudes never met. Maybe they did. If they did, I'll put a picture of them shaking hands on the screen right now. And there she is.
Cool little thing.
When the US sent the Apollo 11 mission to the moon, it was a Saturn V rocket, which had 3 people in it. The predecessor to that, practicing doing different maneuvers in space, was the Gemini, which had aptly named 2 people in it. But before that, the first rocket that was used to send people into space from the US was the Mercury rocket. And here, built almost 50 years after the first voyage of the Mercury, is a replica of that very same Mercury rocket, Mercury 7, which sent Alan Shepard into space. There she is. A piece of American aerospace engineering, right here in Concord, New Hampshire. There he is, inside the Mercury rocket. Here it is taking off at Cape Canaveral in Florida, I assume, right? He reached an altitude of 115 miles, had weightlessness, and then re-entry at 11 Gs. And Alan Shepard and Freedom 7 splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean. Once he was in the helicopter, he said, "Boy, what a ride."
Gosh darn it, what a ride.
Would you go to space? All right, let's go.
New Hampshire has the first vote of the primaries for the United States presidential election, which gives it undue political influence in the United States electoral process.
Well, Tolu's taking a meeting in the Manchester Library now. And while he's doing that, we're gonna take a lap around the block, because in this neighborhood, there's like 4 churches that I've seen. So we're gonna go investigate, see what kind of churches they are, what denomination, and see what we can learn about Manchester's past and present by investigating its churches. Manchester is the biggest city in all of New Hampshire. Population is over 100,000 people. It used to be a major hub of manufacturing. It's home to the, I'm gonna pronounce this wrong, I know, Amaskig textile mill, which was the largest cotton textile mill in the entire world in the early 1900s, employing over 17,000 people. And then, of course, as happened in much of the Northeast and Midwest of the United States, well, the manufacturing jobs left. But they left behind a beautiful industrial city here in the Northeast that now is a bit rough around the edges, to be honest. There's definitely some characters walking the streets. So anyways, let's investigate these churches, and then once we're with Tolu again, we can go explore some more. This is a giant church. The St. Joseph Cathedral, Roman Catholic Diocese of Manchester. 1808. I don't know if it was built in that year or if it existed in that year, but something was happening in 1808. It's obviously been refurbished since it was built, but it's a giant church, well kept up. Look at the colored tiling. Very nice design. And now right across the street from old St. Joseph's, we got Grace Episcopal Church. Definitely a bit more modest than its Catholic counterpart across the street. That's what King Henry gets. He gets the small church because he decided to leave the Catholic Church. There was traditionally a huge Catholic population here because even more French Americans, French Canadians, came down from Quebec to Manchester. The trend was even much bigger than it was in Berlin. Obviously, Manchester's a bigger city, it had bigger factories, and so it needed more labor. In total, about 350,000 Quebecois came down into the northeastern United States, and many of them came here to Manchester, and still today there's also apparently a French-speaking community. And now we're on to church number 3. Check that out. It's got the dome on top, which makes me think that it's Orthodox, but let's go and take a look. Wow, I was not expecting this. St. Mary's Ukrainian Catholic Church, 1908. I thought that Ukraine was pretty much mostly Orthodox. Maybe I'm wrong. I've really no idea. I mean, I'm not an expert on Eastern European religion, but wow. You can see there's a Ukrainian flag and a US flag here. And then you have the Virgin Mary dressed in Ukrainian colors. Check this out. Very interesting. And most of this building just looks like a classic New England house. Like, looking at this, you would just think it's a house. Even there, you know, maybe a bit of a steeple or whatever. And then up top you have the dome. Very distinct feature on this very New England looking building. So there's some insight for you into some of the groups that have been and still are today in Manchester. How was your meeting?
That's good.
We're about to get some empanada. Colombianos. Antojitos colombianos. Hola. Buenos días. Por favor, 4 empanadas, 2 de pollo y 2 de carne. Cool artwork of traditional Colombian, Afro-Colombian culture here on the walls. Over here as well. No shortage of music and colorful pictures in Colombia. Look at that. Reminds me of a bus I once took in Colombia. ¿Eres de Colombia? ¿De qué parte? ¿De? Estaba 3 semanas en Colombia. Es muy lindo. Estaba allá en la valle de Concord. ¿Y desde cuánto tiempo estás en Manchester, en New Hampshire?
31 years
31 years, wow.
en América.
¿Hay una grande comunidad de latinos aquí o no?
Pues para mí encierra todo. En
Sí.
México, Caribe, Centroamérica, todo.
Hay un poco de todo.
El colombiano no. Yo poco. Bueno, lo felicito, mucho gusto. Mi nombre
Gracias.
es Antonio.
Antonio Benjamín.
Benjamín, qué bien.
Mucho gusto
Oh,
y
mucho gusto.
gracias, chao.
Que esté bien.
Made a quick friend with Antonio. I don't know how much of that was good filming, good content. You know, maybe I'll just put a quick snippet. But that guy who was working in there, Antonio, great dude from Colombia. He's from near the Valle of Cocora, where I was. And yeah, we met one of the Colombians of Manchester. He said he's been here for 30 years. There's not a big Colombian population, but there are other Latinos. Even though New Hampshire is one of the least diverse states in all of the US, I think like 94% of people are white. We've seen today just how much impact the former mill towns have had on the communities in New Hampshire in terms of bringing in different groups. Obviously, a lot of that was 100 years ago or more when, you know, different white European people were coming here, and so that's part of why New Hampshire is so white. Obviously, you still got some people from Latin America. You got some French speakers. You got the Russian Orthodox Church. It's not just all descendants of the original English settlers here in New England. There's definitely more than meets the eye here in New Hampshire. Driving into the old complex of the Amoskeag Manufacturing Complex, which used to be the biggest cotton textile plant in the entire world. Here in Manchester, New Hampshire. These buildings here on the right, they purposely had super big windows, and it's a super skinny building so that they could get as much natural light in there so that they didn't have to spend money on electricity. Super classic example of capitalism being great. Squeeze as much money and profit as you can out of it. Now it looks like there's what's in there? Just lofts, apartments, probably. All of this used to be one giant company and its factory. And this goes on. Look how far up it goes. It went bankrupt in 1935. Yeah. And look up to the right. It's lofts at Mill West, which is the west bank of the river. And there's more. It's just a canyon of factories. Just imagine all of the different workers here, like working 19-hour shifts, coming out, collecting their 88 cents per day.
Their arms being cut off.
Their arms getting cut off by the machines.
By machines, yeah. Very exciting, I've heard.
Yeah. How many bricks do you think there are?
I would say like definitely a couple million.
Okay. And now we head to the sea. Do you want to teach me how to get to Plymouth? Keep left. Portsmouth. Barely know her.
Yo!
We have now pulled up to New Hampshire's third biggest city. This year, the great city of Portsmouth that we're in right now, the third biggest city in New Hampshire, turns 400 years old. So shout out to Portsmouth for being old as fuck. We've reached the sea. Oh, there's a boat.
Behind me, you'll see the Portsmouth shipping yard, where the Russo-Japanese war was finished with a treaty in 1905.
So before we finish, I just want to say thank you for coming along with us today. This has been a state profile of New Hampshire. Next, we're going to have Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and Washington, D.C., and then we'll have finished all of the states. And now for some closing words from Tolu.
Daniel Webster, born January 18th, 1782, was an American lawyer and statesman who represented New Hampshire and Massachusetts in the U.S. Congress. And now for a closing word from Daniel Webster. If we work upon marble, it will perish. If we work upon brass, time will efface it. If we rear temples, they will crumble to dust. But if we work on men's immortal minds, if we impress on them with high principles, the just fear of God and love for their fellow man, we engrave on those tablets something which no time can efface and which will brighten to all eternity.